If you walked up to me on the street and asked me what the least important and most annoying thing in the FNAF timeline was, I'd scream, because what the hell? And then probably say Sister Location or FNAF 4. So let's just get right into it. Alright, we know it's after FNAF 4 for two reasons. Hand Unit says it was made to specifically capture the market after the closure and massive success of Freddy's. So, if Fredbear's is still around and just closed, that doesn't count. A Freddy's has to have closed. And as far as we understand, the Missing Children's incident is in 1985, which would be the first closure of a Freddy's place. So yeah, minimum it has to be after 1985. Secondly, if Evan was still alive, then shouldn't he have psychic friend Fredbear with him instead of it being in the secret hidden room? Not to mention, why are the cameras focused on Michael's room if nothing was happening? For the sake of video pacing, we're going to ignore the fact that that's kind of a debatable topic, but we're just going to assume it's canon for now. Let's ignore the fact that I have to explain that in another video. Also, if Evan was still alive, then shouldn't the camera be monitoring both their rooms? I mean, we don't really know for a fact which room this is, but if we assume it's Michael or Evan's, then it's still really weird. Why is he only focusing on one kid's room? He has reason to watch both kids, in theory. We also know that by the time the survival logbook happens, Michael's already been through Sister Location. We can see this pretty damn clearly when he mentions the cash basket and casual bongos, which he could only know about by going through Sister Location's story. Here's our first kind of gray area roadblock. There are a handful of references to FNAF 3 in the survival logbook. Now, I originally brushed this off to the side because I thought, that's just a one-off artistic thing. But then, they appear in almost every night promo in the book. Like, every time Foxy's talking about, oh, congrats, you made it to night 3, it's the FNAF 3 office. Which is pretty weird. Point being that it could, in theory, be somewhere before FNAF 3 if FNAF 3 is the survival logbook's time point. My issue with that, though, is Cassie and Evan are both in the book, so it would have to be, like, midway through Fazbear Fright's storyline. And also, Fazbear Fright itself is never mentioned anywhere in the book, to my knowledge. I mean, I have the book, I've read through it, and I can't figure out anything that would imply directly that Fazbear Fright's made this book, or has happened. So, yeah, could be after FNAF 1, but also since all of the character designs in the book are derived from FNAF 1 designs, or just the latest versions of those designs, it's kind of hard to tell, so let's say it could be after FNAF 1, but I need evidence for that. Trust me, that's not going to make a difference, really. The survival logbook isn't as important as I thought it was when I started writing this. Alright, that was the T-ball part of this theory. First up to bat, Schrodinger's Death Rabbit. So at the start of the game, someone is talking to William about how advanced Baby is. And Elizabeth talks to him throughout the nights about how pretty and shiny Baby is and how she wants to meet him. Obviously, there's a flashback, because it's not like Elizabeth dies midway through the game. So William's alive during the founding of Sister Location when he's making all the characters. But Michael says, I'm going to come find you, as Springtrap flashes on screen, and we're never given any implications that William was dead or hiding prior. As far as we know, what makes William go missing is becoming Springtrap. So here's what's tricky. Sister Location has to be formed before William dies, and somehow end by the time he's died. We also know that if it is after FNAF 1, it has to be like right after FNAF 1. Considering that Elizabeth is, still a little girl, and since Fazbear Frights is 30 years later, the closer we get towards that, the less realistic and reasonable her age would be, so that's a whole complicated part of this. Another tricky part of this is that the Springlock suits are still in use when the original Circus Baby's pizzeria is formed. Baby says it came from my old pizzeria when referring to the Night 4 suit. What's complicated about that is Phone Guy in FNAF 3 says that the suits have been sealed away and are abandoned. Now, we don't know which Freddy's location this Phone Guy era is from, but we can assume it has to be before FNAF 1 or during FNAF 1 at the latest. Since, Phone Guy dies, and if we assume this is the same character, then it would have to be early into the lifespan of FNAF 1, or some pizzeria before that. Point being, if Circus Babies was fully formed after FNAF 1, then that creates a weird narrative plot hole that could have been easily avoided in any alternative minigame or concept in Sister Location. Like, he could have thought of anything, but he chose to put us in a Springlock suit and give a special dialogue with weird implications like, it came from my old pizzeria. It was used, but not the way it was meant to be used. kind of lines. Like, why go through all that effort if this wasn't important? So that gives us this weird element where the original Circus Baby's Pizzeria, which was only open for one day, has to include the Springlock suits. She also says it's her old pizzeria, but I think that's more like how you say my old house, even if you just moved out of it, so that's another side point I just want to cover there. The other interesting thing here is Sister Location is described as being active for a while. Enough for multiple maintenance workers to have been there and died, or at least left, or got fired, or whatever reasons. Okay, here's another strange detail that makes it hard for it to be fully after FNAF 1. A running detail of FNAF 1 is that the company was on very low budget, and more importantly, that the building was failing and was doomed to die by the end of the year. But Circus Babies specifically was made to fill in after the massive success of Freddy's. This is fundamentally opposed to how FNAF 1 is framed and set up, this rotting building that falls apart during the minigames of FNAF 3. That said, nothing here is impossible. It could still be after FNAF 1. There's just a lot of weird points in the timeline that make that harder to say. I do want to talk about the whole tech argument of Sister Location has to be later in the timeline because all the animatronics are so advanced. Do people understand how advanced the Springlock suits are? They are mobile animatronics that can hear and recognize where children are, walk there of their own volition, and have mechanics that can be spread apart so a person could climb in it and not die immediately. I mean, they can still die, but point being, that tech is absurd to be that compact and portable, as well as do anything that they can. Like, that's beyond the whole facial recognition. That's child's play compared to what the Springlock suits are in 1983. I'm sorry, that's always bugged me, because I'm like, Circus Babies is actually not as advanced as what the Springlock suits are in theory. Okay, so here's a few other little details. The Funtime animatronic roster are all thick, plasticky designs that are all shiny and reflective, with red rosy cheeks, just like the FNAF 2 designs. Furthermore, the Funtime Foxy character is still in use at this point, and we know that Funtime Foxy is what the character Mangle was supposed to be before she was torn apart. And I'm not saying they're the same physical animatronic, I just mean they represent the same character in the company. And in FNAF 2, we also know that the humanoid characters were still in use at this point, even though they're completely abandoned by the time FNAF 1 rolls around. And also, more importantly, people still had access to the Springlock suits at this point in time. William uses a yellow suit on Jeremy's 6th day, so we can assume that Spring Bonnie was still accessible and not sealed away. So I have two propositions. One is that Sister Location is just right after FNAF 1 closes, and by the time the game ends, William has gone off and died. That's kind of boring and simple. If we assume this was all retconned and Scott didn't care about any prior details, then sure, that works. But I do have a more interesting way to lay out the timeline. I think that it is possible that Sister Location could be formed after FNAF 2 closes, but end by the time FNAF 1 closes. Okay, that's going to be kind of weird, but let me get through this. Alright, so here's how I think the story goes, and I'm kind of just filling in gaps here, but this is a more interesting way to lay out the timeline than Sister Location is just after or before FNAF 1. This is probably the most dynamic way to fill in all the holes in Sister Location's timeline. Is it correct? Does it work? Yes. So I think what happens is FNAF 2 is a big success, but of course it gets shut down because William just leaves the bodies everywhere this time. I mean, he kind of probably did that the first time around based on how the give life minigame happens, but anyway, point being, FNAF 2 was big, but it didn't last. So it's like, damn, I need something to fill in for FNAF 2. So let me just reuse the plastic designs, make bigger, better animatronics that can lure the kids away so I can kill them in secret without anyone understanding or knowing that I killed them. And that leads to Circus Babies being opened, Elizabeth dying while William's busy killing the other kids. So we know that in Night 4, in Sister Location, Baby says that suit was used not in the way it was intended to be used, which strongly implies William killed kids in it. So then after Baby dies in Elizabeth, the Funtimes are stored underground and rented out to keep profits flowing while William studies and experiments on them. I mean, why else would they be down there? It's not like William's just ashamed of them, he still rents them out and tortures them, so clearly he still wants to use them. But I think if it was a running pizzeria, he would have less time to use and experiment on them, which is why they're being rented out. But hey, he still doesn't have a pizzeria on the surface active anymore, so he makes the FNAF 1 crew with whatever he has left over. Just reuse the old characters, reuse the old parts, find an old building, get it going. And of course that's terrible because they all rot of dead children, so it closes down pretty quickly. So he's like, damn, I need to get those parts now because I need to reuse everything I can at this point. So he goes over there for whatever he wants out of the original MCI Kids robots, but the point is he's there to take whatever he can. And that's where the FNAF 3 minigames happen, and he dies, and he's cornered by the original MCI Kids. Also, I'd like to interject right here that during FNAF 3, we see that William puts on the spring lock suit, and a lot of people brush it as, he puts it on for some reason. That's not a map how to brush him up, that's just me just doing a voice. Look how you escape Golden Freddy in FNAF 2. You put on a mask. What does William have right there that he could walk right out of the room through? Putting on a suit to escape the spirits. I think this is just cool continuity on Scott's part that a lot of people brush aside as a mistake or plot hole. That actually tracks exactly with how FNAF works. Spirits can't affect you while you're in a suit or have indirect eye contact with them. So that's the best way I can rationalize this, where it starts during FNAF 2 and then ends after FNAF 1 due to the several years that Circus Baby's was open and still running. It's the only way you can kind of have it all work, with the spring lock suit still being in use and active without running into the plot holes of, wait, if this is after FNAF 1, which is the last Freddy's, then how can any of this still be working or happening? So yeah, that's the best way I could spin it to make sense. I don't know if that's correct or what Scott intended, but to be honest, if you perfectly rationalize all of the events of this game, your head will collapse into an event horizon and you'll just die there, a brain fart. So it's just a way to get it to work. To be honest, there are plot holes no matter where you stick it. So, hey, that works. That's all. Bye.